new book. We're finished with our Crooked Hearts, and now we're starting the book A Raisin in the Sun. Now, A Raisin in the Sun approaches a much more serious subject and a societal issue than Our Crooked Hearts. And so for that reason, I'm going to be taking a more serious approach. So we won't see quite as many like of the fun things and the hats and all that. But that's okay because I think this story, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, has a lot of good things to add to our curriculum. So it starts out that they live in the south side of Chicago. Now, if you don't know anything about the history of the south side of Chicago, that was traditionally a place where black people were basically functionally excluded to. And so they would they're in that side, they have the high rises, and they're like tenement buildings. They're just really, really small apartments with one, maybe two windows. But we meet some characters right away in Act 1. We meet Walter, we meet Ruth, we meet Benitha, and we meet Travis. And they're all talking about this check. So Walter, first thing he does is he wakes up in the morning and he says, has the check come yet? And his wife, Ruth, says, no, and it's not your check, it's your mother's check. And he's like, oh, but I've got this thing. And my friend Willie, he's got this going, Willie and Bobo, and we're going to buy a liquor store, but we need some money, and we're going to put the money into it, and we're going to have to pay off the guy so we can get a liquor license. And Ruth is like, look, this isn't your money to do anything with. And he's like, hey, you're not on board with my dreams. And she's like, you're going to waste away the money. And Walter's like, yeah, but you're dismissing my dream. So this is where it starts. Then his sister Benitha, then Travis comes in. And what you have to watch for in this play is all these little things that are happening. So like Travis comes in. Well, where does Travis sleep? Travis sleeps on a pull-out couch in the living room. He doesn't have his own bedroom. Travis is like 11 or 12, but doesn't have his own bedroom. He just sleeps on a pull-out couch. Then we have Ruth is making breakfast for Walter and Travis, and she's like half listening to Walter, her husband, and said, how do you want your eggs done? He says, anything but scrambled, and she starts scrambling the eggs. So she doesn't even realize what she's doing. Everything's perfunctory. It's like whatever he says doesn't matter. Travis needs money for school. And she's like, we don't have money for school. We don't have it. Like, you're just going to have to go without. Travis tells Dad this, and Walter is incensed because he feels like it's a statement to him as a man that he can't provide for his family. And so he looks at Ruth like with just contempt and just real ugliness in his heart. And he gives his son 50 cents. And then he said, and by the way, here's 50 cents more. And yet at the same time, Ruth doesn't have money to buy groceries. So how would you feel? Think about that. You're pinching pennies and you're trying to make things work. And the person who's supposed to be standing right by you just gives the money to someone else. Kind of a slap in the face, right? Mm-hmm. So the next person we see on the scene is Benitha. Benitha is Walter's sister. And Benitha comes in, and Walter's like, ooh, one more day, we'll get the check. And Benitha's like, Walter, this is not your check. This is Mama's check. And we find out that Benitha is actually going to medical school. Now, if we think about when this book was written in the 60s, actually late 50s, 1958, this was quite a big deal because women, especially black women, were barely allowed into colleges. Like, we're just getting allowed into colleges. And now she wants to go to medical school. So this is huge, just huge. And anyway, so she's like, Walter, this isn't your money. This is Mama's money. Just get over it. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, like, you're not going to use that money to pay for medical school? And she's like, look, I haven't asked anybody for money for medical school. I've been paying my own way. And then Walter gets all up in her face and says, oh, yeah, well, we've been making sacrifices so you can go to medical school. Now, we don't know what those sacrifices are, right? So with that being said, so that kind of sets the tone for what's going on. So Walter is like scheming. He sees this check as part of, as like something he's owed. But everybody else is saying, it's not your money, Walter. It's your mother's money. You need to let your mom do with it as she wants to do with it. So that's where we're at. All right, so now we are going to go to some of our study guide questions. So let's take a look. Remember, when you're answering study guide questions, to always use that complete sentence. So what does the opening description of the Younger family's apartment say about them? So let's take a look at that description. The Younger living room would be a comfortable and well-ordered room if it were not for a number of, sorry guys, indestructible contradictions in the state of beings. Its furnishings are typical and undistinguished, and the primary feature now is that they clearly had to accommodate the living of too many people for too many years, and they are tired. So, what does that, I think it kind of says it right there, that the apartment symbolizes that a lot of people have been living, living in a small space for many years. I think and it talks to the state of where societally we have placed African American individuals, like in these basically tenements. And as we go further, we're going to find out they don't even have their own bathroom in the apartment. So it really, it is a statement of how society views Black people. That they aren't good enough. I would say society gave them the bare minimums. Sorry. Okay. What does the absence of light in the Younger's apartment signify? And why does Ruth so desperately hope for light in the new house? Well, the light, or the lack thereof, whoops, let me put it in purple. Let me get to that. Sorry, guys. Represents, so I'm just going to put the start in here and you guys can finish it. But the lack of light represents the lack of hope in their lives. Look at Ruth. Does Ruth have a lot of hope as she's listening to her husband and about his dream? They don't have a lot. She doesn't appear to have a lot of hope that things are going to get better. So she wants that light in the new house because she feels like if she can get in a new place that she will have more hope. So what do we know about each character so far? So let's take a look at this. So again, we start with that complete sentences. So far, we know that Ruth is whose wife? Is Walter's wife. And she is, how would we describe her? I would say that she has been beat up by life. She's working. She works for people in a servant's type job. She cleans their house. Walter is a chauffeur for a very rich man. But she's been beat up. She's like, this is our life. It is what it is. Let's make the best of it. Walter has a dream. Oops. That should say Walter, right? Walter has a dream. The problem is that he wants to be part of a get-rich-quick scheme. And he's upset. And you probably want to put this in there. Sorry, guys, my contacts aren't working right. But he's upset because nobody else believes in his friend Willie or Bobo. And he's like, I'm the only one with a dream here, okay? Then there's Benitha. Benitha is Walter's sister, and she is studying for medical school. Then there's Travis. Travis is Ruth and Walter's son. Okay? We don't know much about Travis yet, except that he's basically a child, and he, like I said, he doesn't have his own bedroom or anything like that. Okay? So this brings us to the next question, number 4. How do we describe Walter and Ruth's relationship so far? What circumstances impact their relationship? Well, so far I would say Walter and Ruth have, let's just talk about it. What kind of relationship do they have? Remember when Ruth said, Walter, how do you want your eggs? And he said, anything but scrambled. What did she start doing? She scrambled his eggs. Does she appear to listen to Walter? Not really. And is Walter very respectful to Ruth? No. Remember how, she's like, we don't have money. We're barely scraping by. And what did when she was saying that to Travis, because Travis said, well, I need 50 cents. And she's like, tough nuggets. We don't have the money. Well, then when Walter heard that, he was like, what? We have the money. In fact, here's your 50 cents, and here's 50 cents more. And he looks right at Ruth, and so he's very contemptuous. He's just angry, and he's like, how dare you say I can't provide for my son? So there's a lot of contempt and almost like anger. And so Walter and Ruth have a rocky relationship because of that. So what circumstances impact their relationship? Well, so again, we're using that. This is how we remember, like how we answer a question by restating it. That's what we need to do. So the circumstances that impact their relationship are what? Are living in an apartment that is too small. They do not have, so that has to impact. They're not living on their own. They're living with Walter's mother and sister. They are working entry-level jobs, even though they're very intelligent, despite their intelligence, right? So there's that frustration because they can't get in the door to anything else because of this color of their skin. And then Ruth do you get the feeling that she has any hope for the future? No, she doesn't. Not have hope that it will get better. And Walter is desperate to get out of poverty and will do anything, get out of poverty, and will do anything. Okay, so that's where they're kind of at right now. And we will keep going on with this. There's a comment in here that where Walter says that African Americans, he talks about the race as a whole as the most backward race of people. Do you think he seriously believes this? So what Walter meant by this is that African American people are unable to, quote unquote, get ahead. Are unable to, I would say, be successful financially. And when he makes that statement, he makes it as like a personal fault of the race. And do you think, so we should say that. But I think, so does he seriously believe this? Well, he doesn't believe it, and I'm going to let you finish this statement on your own. He does not believe this. He's speaking out of frustration because systems have been put in place that prevent African Americans from forging ahead with their financial dreams. This goes back to the American dream. Everybody else in the 50s, you have to understand, as they're coming out of post-World War II, everyone in the 40s, all the white people in the 40s and 50s it was this, they called it the time of Camelot. Everybody was making money if you were white. You were building a big house in the suburbs. You were getting this great job. Men were going to college on the GI Bill, simply where these were people that probably wouldn't have gone to college otherwise, but because they're veterans, they're able to go to college. And black men and women didn't have the same that same opportunity. Black men were drafted in World War II. They did fight in World War II. And even if they were part of the GI Bill, like white men were, it was much more difficult for them to get accepted into colleges to even utilize the GI Bill. So you can see where it's the frustration. It's the frustration of watching all of this happen, but yet still knowing you're held up in this apartment, this dinky, dank apartment that your race of people have been systematically made to live there. Okay, so what does this check hold? Well, the check is actually a life insurance check. Walter's father died. That would be Mama's husband. But it signifies, the check signifies hope. So what is holding the youngers back from living in the suburbs, from having a nice house, from getting financial stability? It's opportunity. And this check signifies the hope and the opportunities that they were not afforded simply because of their skin color. Okay. So this next question is really yours to decide. Should Walter be entitled to some of the insurance money? Why or why not? Now remember, both Ruth and Benita are saying, Walter, that's Mama's money. That is not that's not your money. So don't be making plans with it, okay? So I want you. That's again. This is a this is an opinion question. All right. So the decision maker in the family so far. Um, is so far it's Mama. Okay. And Benita does not believe in God, or she is very antagonistic toward the thought of God. And this is significant because nobody in the family has ever challenged that belief. And really, and historically, the real hope that African American people had was the belief in God. Like, God would make everything better. God, and up until this point in history, the African Americans that lived in the United States, their only hope was, oops, sorry, God, was in God. Like, they didn't believe that the system would help them. They just said, okay, when we get to heaven, it'll get a lot better. And that's what got them through. That's historically what we know, or that we understand, and that got the African Americans through, like the slavery and the hard times, was their belief in God. So we'll just say African Americans okay. So, and this goes back to the American dream. They didn't really have a lot of hope in the American dream. So, we're going to go through more of this later on this week, but this gives you a start, and I hope everything is going well. If you have any questions, please let me know, and we will go from there. Have a great day. Okay, guys, this is Miss Middleton here. Sorry, trying to get. Here we go. This is what I want up. Okay, so we're going to go through our reading guide questions. So this first one, given the timeline. Okay, guys, sorry that I thought I had this recording, but it wasn't, so we're going to try this again. Okay, so we're on Act 1, and we're going to go through the discussion guide questions now. So I talked a little bit about the background. Now we're going to talk about the discussion guide questions. So if you will just give me a minute, I'm going to do a real quick little loop-de-loop here. There, that's what I wanted. Okay, so let's look at some of these questions. So the first question, what does the opening description of the Youngers family's apartment say about them? Well, let's talk about this in a historical context, a little bit like we did yesterday. So what was happening during this time in the late 1950s was, like I said, the historical context is important. People were living out the American dream. So that meant all these men were coming back from war. If they were white, they were coming back from war. They were taking advantage of the GI Bill, meaning many people were going to college. They were taking advantage of the fact that they could own a house through the Veterans Administration with very low interest rates. So all these homes were going up, and people were truly living out the American dream if you were white. However, if you were black or if you were of Asian descent, that really didn't happen. So the Younger family is living in this apartment that maybe has one window. And it symbolizes, first of all, reality is that black people were put into these tenements basically by red laws. I believe that's what they were called. But where they were just basically, they were systematically put in certain neighborhoods. And they weren't good neighborhoods. They didn't have the amenities that the suburbs had. They didn't have the parks. They didn't have the infrastructure. These neighborhoods, there were high-rise apartments, and there were small apartments with no yards, no green spaces. So it symbolizes how society was treating black people as if they shouldn't be a part of everybody else. And it also is the symbolism of people of just saying, okay, we'll let you be a part of society, but you only get the bare minimums. You don't get what everybody else gets. So that's part of it. The other part, it shows like how bleak the past has been for these people. Okay, what does the absence of light in the Youngers' apartment signify? Why does Ruth desperately hope for light in the new house? So what I did want to show you is that anytime we get a question, we always want to make sure that we answer it. And the way you answer it is by restating the question, making it a statement. And so the lack of light represents, well, what does it represent? There's a lot of things that it represents. Lack of hope, lack of just lack of being able to go forward, lack of a dream. And Ruth sees her life as so dark, like there's no hope for getting out of it. There's nothing good in her life. So she hopes for a light in the new house, because that new house is going to represent a new chapter, a new dream. Okay? Each of the characters that we've learned about so far we've met Ruth. She's just been beat up by life. She works basically as a servant. She's a maid, housekeeper, whatever you want to call it, for a family. Walter is a chauffeur for a wealthy man. They don't have a lot of hope for getting ahead in life. They live with Walter's family. They're married. They have a son. Their son doesn't even have his own bedroom. Their son sleeps on a sofa bed in the living room, and Benitha is there as well. So anyway, Ruth is pretty beat up in life. Walter has a dream. Walter wants to achieve the American dream. However, his idea of, he's impatient. He's willing to go in on like different like schemes, and he's like, well, if I would have done this, and he's willing to go with all these get rich quick schemes. So he's not willing to He's so desperate for the dream that he'll reach out for anything. Then beneath is Walter's sister, and she's studying for medical school. And so this is a little bit different. Benita doesn't conform to the typical black family. She's not a woman that's going into the going to be in a servant type job. She's not going to she doesn't want to work for somebody else. She wants to be a professional. And this is a new concept. First of all, it's rare that women even went to medical school in the 50s and 60s, much less a black woman. And then Travis is Ruth and Walter's son. He's a kid. He's pretty happy-go-lucky. Hasn't been beat up yet by life. So you can kind of see how this dichotomy is happening. Now, Walter and Ruth's relationship so far is interesting because Ruth she's full of a lot of contempt and anger. She's working hard, and Walter's always talking about having to get out of the apartment, and yet he's always on these get-rich-quick schemes. But we see this contempt. We see this lack of communication. Almost like within minutes of the opening scene, because Ruth says, Walter, how do you want your eggs? And he says, anything but scrambled. And she starts scrambling the eggs, totally disconnected with him. Then we see where Walter, it's really affecting Walter, because then Walter, we find out, like, Travis wanted money for something for school, 50 cents. And Ruth is like, we don't have it. And then Walter finds out about this, and Walter takes it as a personal affront to him. And he's like, he not only does he give Travis 50 cents for whatever's needed for school, he gives him another 50 cents to do whatever he wants with. And he looks right at Ruth when he does this, as if, I'll show you. You're not going to tell me that we don't have money. Okay? So we're looking at two people, like, Walter doesn't really want to accept where they're at in life. Like, he's angry that he's there because, again, it's not something he chose to do. It's that he's systematically, it's difficult for him to find a job. It's difficult for him to get ahead. And Ruth knows, and his idea is, we're going to get out of this, and he's willing to do anything to get out of that. Ruth is equally angry about being in this situation. However, she gets more depressed. She's like, look, we're never going to get ahead. We're just going to accept it where it's at, and that's what's going to happen. So then that brings us finally to question 5. Is Walter refers to the African American people as the world's most backward race of people, and does he believe this? What Walter meant by it is that African American people are unable to be successful financially, and I need to put in here, because society has made it nearly impossible. And Walter makes a statement as though, like, it's their fault, as though it's African American people's fault that they're not getting ahead financially. He doesn't believe this. He's just angry that this is happening, okay? Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So what significance does this check hold? Well, here's the thing. The check is a life insurance check from when Walter's dad died, or Mama's husband. And the check signifies hope and opportunities that they would never be given simply because they're African American. They look at this check as, okay, this is the money that we needed to achieve the American dream. But Walter thinks he should be entitled to some of this. Now, what is your thought? Do you think Walter should be entitled? Why or why not? So go ahead and answer that question, and we'll talk more tomorrow.